Well, thanks for joining us today. I am Gina Woodward. I'm the Regional Director for the Small Business Development Center at West Texas A&M. If you've never gotten to work with the SBDC before, we help people all across the Texas Panhandle either start small businesses, or perhaps you have an existing small business that you want to expand, or you have some kind of obstacle that you're trying to overcome. That is what we're here to help with. Lunch clubs are a monthly webinar that we've been doing for probably about 5 years, and I think it's really been one of our most popular events. These are really focused on making sure that you get to spend your lunch hour learning a new skill. My goal for these is that when you walk away from this, you have learned something new that you can implement in your business right away to make it better. So our new skill that we are going to learn today has to do with new federal reporting rules for your small business. I very seriously doubt that any of us woke up this morning and were like, I really want to spend my lunch hour talking about federal reporting. I don't even think our presenter probably woke up and wanted to do that. It's one of those necessary evils, but it is new reporting that went into effect this year. And we're still coming across so many small business owners that this will impact, and they are unaware of the requirements. That's why we are really fortunate today to be joined by Mindy McLean. Mindy is a partner with Right Law here in Amarillo. They do a great deal of work with small businesses from startup, maybe working on buy-sell agreements, helping them with their exit plans. And she's probably done more BOI reports than she cares to think about, but is really an expert in town and understands how small business owners need to approach these and the importance of them. So please meet Mindy McLean as we go throughout the webinar today. If you have questions, you're welcome to type them in chat. In the end, you also have the option to unmute yourself if you want to ask Mindy in person. So Mindy, thank you for spending your lunch hour talking about something that is not particularly sexy, but it is necessary.
Thanks, Gina. It's definitely not something fun to talk about, the Corporate Act, but it is something necessary and it affects a lot of people. It's probably one of the things that if I've spent 2024 doing anything, it's talking about the corporate transparency and BOI reports. And we'll get into all of that, but part of that is because we do have a deadline coming up at the end of the year, which is going to be applicable for most of you. If you have to file, your deadline is going to be December 31, 2024. So we'll just jump right into it. I'm going to go through some slides. Like Gina said, if you have questions, feel free to jump in, feel free to put them in the chat box. So first things first, I'm not your lawyer, nor am I your CPA, but if you have specific questions that are maybe only applicable to you and you want to follow up, visit with me about that later. I'm going to put my phone number and my email and a specific email that we have for BOI related issues at the very end of this. So you're welcome to take those and reach back out to me again if you have something that you don't feel comfortable talking about in front of everybody today. So we've talked about a little bit. This is the Corporate Transparency Act. And with that, there is a segment of new requirements for beneficial ownership information reporting. You're going to hear me use some abbreviations and some acronyms throughout this, so that nobody has too many questions about this. I'm going to go through these. I've gotten to the end of a presentation before and somebody said, I have no idea this word you kept using over and over again. So I'm going to get ahead of that right now. The Corporate Transparency Act, you're going to hear me refer to that as the CTA. When we talk about a BOI or a BOI report, that means I'm talking about a beneficial ownership information or the report related to beneficial ownership. FinCEN is the arm of the U.S. Department of Treasury that's enforcing and requiring these BOI reports. FinCEN stands for Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. And in case you thought I made that up, here's their logo. So they sort of fight financial crimes, I guess, if you will. They work with the IRS and other arms of the Department of Treasury. So what is the Corporate Transparency Act? It went into effect as of January 1, 2024, and it requires certain business entities, and those will also be called reporting companies, to file, in the absence of an exemption, information on their beneficial owners with FinCEN. Now, you might be asking, why do I have to do this? A lot of this information is already given to the IRS when you file your tax returns. The point is to help the government detect, prevent, and punish terrorism, money laundering, and other misconduct through business entities. So this information that we have to compile and report to FinCEN can be shared with law enforcement if they're doing a criminal or civil investigation. There are certain circumstances where it can also be shared with financial institutions like banks or the regulators that oversee banks. If you've ever gotten a loan, a commercial loan, you may have filled out a beneficial ownership type form in part of your loan package. Previous to now, banks were required to kind of keep up with this information and who the beneficial owners of companies were. Now, FinCEN is sort of taking over that, and they're requiring each business to self-report on that information. So first question, what types of business entities are required to comply with the reporting requirements? And it's a wide net. Entities in the US and outside the US may be subject to reporting requirements. Generally, when I'm talking to small business owners, we're talking about corporations, limited liability companies. It could be a limited partnership or a family limited partnership. Any entity that you've had to file a certificate of formation or articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State, not just Texas, but any state where you might have filed a document to actually create your entity with the Secretary of State, then you by definition are going to be a reporting company. Then you can decide if you meet one of the exemptions. So I'll talk about, there's exceptions and there's exemptions. Exceptions would be a trust that doesn't file anything with the Secretary of State, or maybe an estate of a deceased person. Nothing is filed with the Secretary of State to create that trust or to create that estate. So they would be an exception to a reporting company or an entity. There's a list of 23 exemptions that might also apply. So even if you meet the definition for a reporting company, you may be exempt. I'll list a couple of those that apply. Again, there's 23, and I'll show you the list of exemptions here in a minute. The main ones that I talk to other companies about most frequently are banks are exempt, accounting firms are exempt, large operating companies, and FinCEN has a definition of what a large operating company is, inactive entities, tax exempt entities, and then there's a few more. Insurance, certain insurance companies are exempt. As long as you meet the requirements, you don't have to file anything saying I have an entity that is exempt. You just don't file a BOI report. And then if that changes, if you met an exemption, let's say in 2024 for being a large operating company, but then in 2025, you no longer met that definition, then you would need to file. So what is a beneficial owner? And what goes into this report? First is beneficial owners, and that may sound like owner in the typical sense that you think of an owner of something, but it actually has a little weirder definition. In general, a beneficial owner is an individual who owns or controls at least 25% of a company or has substantial control. And FinCEN gave us a test for what it means to have substantial control. Most often what that means is if you have a company and you have a set of owners who are the members, let's say of an LLC, or they're the shareholders of a corporation, but you also have officers. So maybe you have a CEO, maybe you have a CFO, a COO, one of those officers who's not technically an owner, but if they meet the test for they can exercise substantial control over the company, then under FinCEN's definition, they are also a beneficial owner. And you would be required to report them on your BOI report. The other item that may need to be reported is the company applicant. That's only going to apply for new entities that were created in 2024 or later. So that could be, in our case as a law firm, we often actually establish these companies and we file the certificate of formation with the Secretary of State. So in that case, we are the company applicant. I have a specific FinCEN ID that I applied for. So now whenever we create an LLC or we work with a company to set up a new entity, I can just give out that FinCEN ID, or I can help them with filing that report, but I don't have to give out my personal information necessarily or give them a copy of my driver's license, that kind of thing. I just give them my FinCEN ID. But in that instance, I would be a company applicant. If you set up your entity through LegalZoom, they could be the company applicant. If your CPA helped you with it, they could be the company applicant. So that's a new additional, in addition to beneficial owners, you have to also file who the company applicant is.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Hartwell, and I am actually partnered with Uti Ferris on Fly to Bali now. We've created our own LLC. We filed everything. We're not really up and running yet, but my question would be, even if you didn't file our LLC, would you be willing to share that FinCEN number with us?
As far as being your company applicant?
Yes, because we have we're just going in this completely blind, right? We're just building this business. And so we have a lot of questions, especially with the reporting, everything that goes into that. I had go ahead.
Yeah, Lindsay, let's chat. Let's work through the rest of this, and then I can get with you after and kind of talk about your specific
Wonderful. Yes,
okay.
ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So that's kind of going over just who is a beneficial owner as defined by FinCEN, and then how is that different from a company applicant, which are the two kind of questions that you might see when you go through these report forms. I talked about deadlines to file, and most people are going to fall under this first one, which is if you have a company that you created before January 1, 2024. So your certificate of formation or your articles of incorporation were filed in any year prior to 2024, you have until the end of this 2024 year to file your initial report. The only difference would be if you created a new company in this year in 2024, so you actually filed a new company, you have 90 days from the date that you incorporated to get that report filed. That changes immediately as of 1/1/2025. So after the end of this year, any new company that's created 2025 or later, you only have 30 days. So initially, when they were setting this up, they wanted to give everybody 30 days, and that was just way too short because this is so new and nobody knew what we were doing and what this was even going to look like. So they're giving us basically this year to get it figured out. And then after this year, if you set up a new company, then you have 30 days to file your initial BOI report. It is what they consider to be a one-time filing, meaning that you only file your initial report. It's not an annual requirement. But if you have changes to the initial report, so if you change the name of your company or your ownership changes, you have to file a correction or an update to your initial report. And those are going to be due within 30 days of the change. I also mentioned if you, let's say, for example, in 2024, you met the criteria for an inactive entity or a large operating company, and then in 2025, you no longer met the criteria for that exemption, then you need to file your report within 30 days of losing that exemption. And keep in mind, for most of you, it's going to be the end of this year. The SBDC did a good job of getting this out there, but there is a risk of not complying. So if you willfully choose not to comply, or if you're not able to gather all the information you need and you don't get your report on file in time, then FinCEN has told us that a person or the company who willfully fails to comply or violates these requirements can be subject to civil penalties of $500 a day. This was adjusted for inflation, and so it's actually 591 as of right now, dollars per day. And then, and or criminal penalties of up to 2 years and a fine of up to $10,000. So the potential violations for willfully failing to file, willfully providing false information, or willfully failing to correct or update previously reported information, those are all considered to be acts of non-compliance. So if you fail to do it, you provide false information, or you fail to correct or update within the time required, then this is what FinCEN has told us they can do to enforce these requirements. And again, it can be against the company and or the individuals who are part of that company. A lot of information can be found online. FinCEN has a website. They also have a specific BOI website. I've put that here on the screen. This is actually where you go to file your report as well. I'm going to show you a couple of things now. This is what the report looks like. It's sort of a writable PDF. There's instructions here. You go through, you check the box, you fill out your applicant information if needed. The next page is about your company information. That's name, tax ID number, where was your company formed, what is the current US address. Here's your company applicant, if that applies to you. And then your beneficial owners. And you can add pages. You know, some companies have many people that would qualify as a beneficial owner, so you'll fill this out for each one of them. You do have to attach a document image. For most people, that's going to be a driver's license, could be a passport. You'll attach that for each beneficial owner. As you work through this document, you can validate it, and it'll tell you where you've left maybe blanks, things like that. One thing that FinCEN was specific about is you cannot submit this with blanks in it. So it won't validate or finalize if you've left anything blank. So if you don't know an address, or you don't know a date of birth, or you don't have a driver's license, you're going to have to get that information. Otherwise, you won't be able to file this. The other document that I think has been helpful, and I've referred to it frequently, is this small entity compliance guide. It's also available on FinCEN's website. I think it's helpful because if you're like me and you're a little bit more of a visual learner, it will walk you through a lot of the things that I've just talked about. It will walk you through who your beneficial owners are. It will give some examples. Here is the list of exemptions that I mentioned. There's 23 of them. So if you have a reporting company, but you think you might qualify for an exemption, here's the list. And then there's actually sort of a checkbox, yes or no, to see if you qualify for the exemption. I think it's best practice, if you think you qualify for an exemption, to go ahead and fill out this checkbox for 2024 or whatever. Keep it with your records. If you ever lost an exemption, or it came down to whether or not you needed to file a report, if you had this in your file, you could remember back in 2024, I qualified for the large operating exemption or the inactive exemption, and just keep that in your file. So like I said, I think it's helpful. I've referred to it often. Sometimes I send people pages from it if we're trying to work through a question about who's an owner or whether an exemption applies. It's 57 pages, so I'm just scrolling through it now, but it's a lot of information that FinCEN has put out that I think is helpful. So I've linked that here as well. If you want to pull down that compliance guide, it's in a PDF. Lastly, here's my email address, our office phone number. and our email that we set up, if you have a specific BOI question, if you want us to help you with filing your report, this email goes to everyone in our office. We have certain people that actually file the reports here in our office, so we usually try to, one of them will respond. It probably won't be me, but we try to just get back to you, understanding that that deadline is coming up very quickly and we have holidays and other things involved. So if you have a specific BOI question, or you need someone to call you back, or you want to set up a meeting and go through your BOI, or you want us to help do it for you,
Okay. Okay.
Hello,
Then-
ma'am.
email there. Yes.
Hello? Is this for small business? Do you have paperwork that I might could get or whatever? Because I have a business and I just switched over to LLC.
So I think the two websites that are on the screen right now are probably going to be most helpful to you. That the first one is just the main BOI website. This is where you can pull that PDF that I just showed you. And you can also get the compliance guide. It all came from that same website.
Okay, is it for all small businesses or is it certain like I have a restaurant?
Yes. If you have an LLC and you're an operating business currently, then yes, this will apply to you.
Okay, and it just gives you 30 days?
If you, do you know when you formed your LLC? Was it in 2024?
Well, actually, I did it in 23, but I didn't actually start using it to this year.
Okay,
So,
well,
like,
you have until December 31 of 2024. So you still have another 45 days-ish to get that report filed. And you can do it anytime. You can do it now. I would advise doing it early rather than waiting, and just in case this website gets.
What kind of report is it?
It's called a beneficial ownership information report.
Okay, I got it right here, BOI. Okay, and so where do I get that form from?
This is Gina. If you'll look, two ways. If you'll look in the chat, I dropped the links to those.
Okay,
And then we will also send a follow-up email to all of you, and we'll include that form that Mindy shared, as well as that small business compliance guide that's got some more details in it.
okay, and if we need help filling this form out, we can call one of you guys?
So I am most definitely not an attorney, so I can give general info, but I would probably get fired if I tried to do legal work. So you don't want me to do that. Mindy is an attorney. Obviously, she does have to charge for her services, but you absolutely could contact her about that. And we will make sure to include her information in the follow-up email in case you want to contact her.
Okay, and the services, I mean, how much do an attorney fee cost?
That's probably something good that you can talk with Mindy one-on-one afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm glad you're
All
on.
right, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Mindy, I don't know that we have ever had this many questions in chat for a lunch club, so you are a very popular person today. I'm going to start going through these. First question is, where can I find the FinCEN ID? And I can drop a link to that, but what do you have to add?
Okay, so a FinCEN ID is an optional thing that you can do. When you go in and you start filling out this form, whether you're a company applicant or whether you're a beneficial owner, you'll see the information that it requests. It wants to know your full legal name, your date of birth, your current residential address, and a copy of your driver's license. If you're like me and you're part of more than one LLC, maybe you have partners in different entities, instead of giving out my name, my date of birth, my driver's license, and my current residential address to every person that might ask for it so that we can get our BOI report filed, I took an extra step and I applied for what's called a FinCEN ID. And so you do that online at the FinCEN website. So once you get that, it gives you a number. I can't tell you exactly what you need that for other than just filling out these forms, and you don't have to have it. We have plenty of businesses that just go in and for each owner, we just fill out the information. We get a copy of their driver's license, we confirm the information on it is correct, and we use that. But because I'm also a company applicant, meaning that I form 100 or so entities a year probably as the applicant, then I might have people who come to me going forward and say, I'm going to fill out my own BOI report, but as part of that report, I have to give information about the company applicant. So in lieu of me again providing my driver's license and all of that information to them, I give them my FinCEN ID. It's kind of like having a driver's license number or a social security number. They can then, when it asks for information about the company applicant, and that's me, then they put in my FinCEN ID number, and that clears that box in the form for them. Otherwise, they would put in my name, my address, my date of birth, and my driver's license number. So I only mention that because that may come up when you form new companies. Somebody asked a question about if I formed in 2018, do I have to fill in the company applicant information? And the answer is no. If you formed prior to 2024, they don't expect you to go figure out who your applicant was and get their information. This is just going to be for entities formed in 2024 and later. They want to know who's forming these entities. Does that make sense, Gina?
I think so.
What a FinCEN ID is? Okay.
It does.
Again,
Yeah.
it's optional. So
Yeah, and if any of you started out as sole proprietors and you later became an LLC or corporation, I think a really good way to think about it, you probably remembered when you filed your 1040, you have the option on that Schedule C to use your social security number or your EIN. Your EIN is to kind of shield your personal information. The FinCEN ID is the same way of thinking. It's just to shield your personal info. All right, our next question from David. In your experience as an attorney, do you feel like this form is something that small business owners have been able to fill out themselves? Do you recommend an attorney? CPAs generally are not filling these out.
yes, that my experience is that for whatever reason, CPAs don't want to fill these out, and I don't blame them. I think most people can fill this out on their own, but I do think we get a lot of questions about whether they're exempt or not, if they qualify as a large operating company, if they have an inactive entity, whether that means they need to file or not. Some people are confused about what it means to be a beneficial owner because of the substantial control issue, and it's not purely an ownership question. The test is, are you a 25% owner or do you exercise substantial control? So, and then for a lot of our clients that have multiple entities, it's just been easier to let us do that for them. So what we've been doing is, if you send us an email and you ask for help with your LLC or corporation BOI filing, we kind of work through it with you over email. We say, how many companies do you have? What's the information? And then we kind of come up with a price, and we work that out with you. You sign an engagement agreement, and then we kind of take care of compiling a lot of that information, running through the tests with you, make sure we have the right parties, and then we get it all filed and we get the transcript back and we provide all that to you and sort of just take it off of your hands. But do I think the form is easy enough and self-explanatory? I do. And I think that compliance guide can help you a lot if you have questions. I would always start there.
Thank you. David had a follow-up question. I think I see it from somebody else as well. Can we share these slides afterwards, Mindy? I didn't ask you that, can we?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have an email out quickly. So you're going to get the recording. You're going to get Mindy's info, and you'll get all of the links that we've shared today as well. All right, moving on in questions. My company was formed in 2014. Do I need to file a BOI report?
Unless you meet one of the exemption requirements, then yes. And the two main, again, are if you're not a bank and you're not an accounting firm and you're not an insurance agent, then are you a large operating company or are you an inactive entity? And I would go through those definitions with you, but they're kind of long. Generally, large operating is you have more than 20 full-time employees and you reported gross revenue of $5 million or more. And there's a couple more things I'll go through. An inactive entity had to be formed prior to 2020, I believe, and you can't own any property, can't have conducted any business, and you can't have basically generated any revenue of $1,000 or more in the last 12 months. So some people have entities they formed and they kind of just let them twist off and die, but they haven't actually terminated them. So we go through the analysis of, is it inactive according to FinCEN? And then should we just go ahead and terminate these because you're not using them anymore? And that way there's no question of whether we have to comply or not. So if you do have one of those, I can maybe answer questions about if you need even if you're not using it, if you think it's not active, you may still be required to file a BOI report. And then you might want to terminate it after that, just to not have that issue going forward.
Thank you. All right, next question. I officially formed my LLC at the end of July of 2024. So I'm past the 90-day requirement. What should I do?
Just get it filed as soon as possible. Nothing else you can do.
Okay.
I think my honest opinion is that if you're operating in good faith and you get it filed as soon as you can, especially if it's in 2024, there's going to be a lot of people that don't comply at all because they don't even know about it. So if you're a little bit late, you're probably in a better off situation than somebody that hasn't filed at all.
Agree. I see another comment about looking for the form. When you get that email, we will also attach a PDF of the form. So no worries, we'll make sure you get everything. A question from Robin. Can you use the same FinCEN number for multiple businesses? She has 8 LLCs to file for.
So I think you're asking again about the FinCEN ID, and that is a personal ID to you. It's not a company ID. So the company applicant is going to be a person, just like the ownership is. And that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because some people have what I'll call a layered entity. So let's say you have an LLC and it's owned by another LLC or multiple LLCs, and you're wondering who is the beneficial owner for purposes of this report. Well, you're never going to put in that a beneficial owner is another company or entity. You're always going to go down till you get to the person level. What they want to know is who are the people that are behind companies. You're not going to be able to report that your LLC owns an interest in another LLC or corporation or anything like that. If your LLC is owned in part by a trust, you will not put the trust information. You will put the information for the trustee of that trust. They are looking for people, individuals, and not other companies. So that FinCEN ID that I mentioned, that is a personal ID number. It will be applicable to you. So if you are a beneficial owner of 8 LLCs, you could apply for that FinCEN ID, and then you'll just fill that in each time rather than putting in all of your information and uploading your ID. It's just kind of a shortcut for you when you're filling it out, but it won't keep you from having to file 8 different reports, which is what you would have to do if you have 8 LLCs that qualify as reporting companies.
Looks like Robin has her work cut out for her.
Yes.
Kind of a comment from Samantha. She mentioned there are some elected officials that have been speaking out against the new reporting requirements, and I have seen that. I think there's some concern about the information sharing. As far as I know, there have been no updates. The reporting requirements are still in effect as of today. That can always change tomorrow. We would certainly keep you updated on that. And we are certainly sensitive to the issue of sharing information. The real reason that we have the reporting requirements now is because traditionally these LLCs and corporations have been one of the primary ways that drug traffickers and human traffickers have been able to launder money and shield money that have been used to support those activities. So this is the federal government's effort to try to combat that when they see perhaps the same person linked to many of these entities. It does help to raise a red flag, and they're able to look into that. So I understand it from both points of view, but as of today, the reporting requirement is still in effect.
Yes, there are lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of it all, but nothing has yet made it to a high enough court that it would alleviate all of us from this requirement. We are at the end of the year and we're approaching the deadline, so we're doing our best to just make you aware of it and make you aware of the risk of noncompliance. I know Gina and her team would update you if that were to change and if it were to be struck down, if anything like that happened. But for now, with as close as we are to the end of the year, we just want to make everybody aware of the deadlines and help get you an understanding of what this is and how to comply with it.
Absolutely. Another question, and I want to add, you may add a comment and make sure I understand, asking about the company that was formed in August of '04, but says, that she's sole and asking if she needs to file. If you are a sole proprietor or a general partnership, any entity that was filed at the county level, this does not apply to you. You don't need to file. If you mean that you're a sole member LLC, then yes, you would need to file. Anything you would add to that, Mindy?
No.
Maricela asked, is there a way to check and see if a report has been filed? And we could probably address that from the individual LLC corporations, members and stockholders. But also, is this public? Am I able to see other people's reports?
No, it's not public. The only way you'll be able to know if a report is already on file for the company that you're inquiring about is when you go to fill out the information and submit a report, you potentially will receive a rejection notice. So when we submit them and they're accepted, then we get an email. It's green. It's literally green, and it's like, success, you did it. When we submit one and there was something that got flagged in the system, then we get a rejection notice. And the only reason we really ever gotten a rejection notice is if someone has given us the wrong tax ID number. And so, or maybe they've given us the same number twice. So when we try to file the second one, it shows a rejection because it shows a report's already been filed for that entity. Then we figure out, what the issue is and we refile it. But the only way you would know if a report has already been filed for a specific company would just be to try to file it, and then you'll either get a success or a rejection notice in your email.
Perfect. So definitely no one's information is available for anyone else to see.
No.
Esmeralda, I see your question about the file online, and she says the form looks a little bit different than the one that Mindy shared. We will email the form, but Mindy, is there anything you would want to address or add to that question?
Yeah, there's two ways when you go to that online BOI filing. You can either file it sort of online, if you will, where you're doing everything on your screen, like on your browser. What we opt to do is we download the report form, which then puts it into a PDF, and it's a writable PDF that you can save. And so we pull it out so that we can save it in a client folder and we can work on it as needed and save it as we go rather than leaving it in a browser. So that's why mine looks different. It's the PDF version rather than the browser version.
Thank you. Samantha asked if it was only applicable to small businesses, and you can answer that.
Yeah, so the rationale behind that is large operating companies, at least in FinCEN's mind, already answer to potentially the SEC, but basically publicly traded companies are already required to provide their information to the government through public filings that they have to make. Now, that doesn't mean that just because you grossed more than $5 million that you're a publicly traded company, but that's the rationale behind it is that large companies already have more regulation than small businesses. So that's why they're exempt, according to FinCEN.
That makes sense. Next question is from Renee. If she filed for an LLC on her own, she will not list a company applicant. Is that correct?
If you filled out and actually filed the certificate of formation yourself, then you are the company applicant. And you only have to report that again if you did that 2024 or later. If you formed your LLC in 2023, you don't have to fill out. And I think it actually grays that out. Once you start filling out the form and you put what year the entity was formed, that kind of thing, it'll gray out that you don't have to put in the applicant. Or if you formed in 2024 or later, it'll be there as a required field in the form. So it should guide you there, but there will always be an applicant, whether that's you or someone else, if you're required to report that.
Question from Charlotte. She was a sole proprietor. She filed an LLC. It sounds like it was recently, asking about going back to sole proprietor. That particular question is probably one to have offline later, but how does that affect BOI reporting?
So in those instances, what I've advised clients is go ahead and file the BOI report. You do not meet the criteria for being inactive. You have a business as of right now, so go ahead and file your initial BOI report. If later you decide to terminate that, you don't have to notify FinCEN that you're no longer a reporting company or that you've gone inactive or anything like that. Your initial report is just there, and then that's all there ever is. If you terminate fully with the Secretary of State and with the IRS, then of course your company just goes away effectively. But I would go ahead and file the report for this year.
Makes sense. Question from Terry. Hello, Terry. My LLC consists of just myself and my husband. She will be filling out the form and is going to use a FinCEN ID. Does her husband also need to get a FinCEN ID?
Again, that's up to you. If you're a company applicant or you're considered a beneficial owner of an entity, that is just your election on whether you want to do that or whether you want to fill out your information every time that you have to file something under the BOI. I've just elected to get a FinCEN ID because I think it's easier. If somebody needs my information to put on a BOI report, all you have to do is provide them that number.
Okay. Question from Jacqueline. She bought out her partner this year and then added on 2 new partners. Because that happened this year, does she need to ensure that the previous partner who's been bought out is on the BOI?
Probably not. If the company was not formed this year, and so you're not in that 90-day requirement window, so I'm going to assume it was formed prior to 2024. Your initial report is not due till the end of the year. So if you've had changes this year, but you haven't yet filed the initial report, I would just file the initial report with the current information. If you had already filed an initial report and then you made those changes, you changed partners in or out, then you would file a correction or an update report, and that would be due within 30 days. But if you have no report on file currently and your deadline is the end of the year, just file what the current ownership is. You don't have to file what it was and then file a change. Just do what the current ownership is as of the date that you file the report.
And Jacqueline did clarify it was formed in 2023.
So you'll just do the one initial report with the current ownership as it sits now.
Very good. And Esmeralda asked if there's only one LLC, is there a benefit to having a FinCEN ID outside of that, just helping to shield your personal information and streamlining filing?
Yeah, no real benefit. When you apply for the FinCEN ID, you're basically giving them the same information that you would be putting in on your report. So for me, it just made sense because I know my information is going to be needed over and over again. But if you're just filing one report and it's for yourself and you're filing it, then you probably don't have the same concern that I do.
That makes sense. Doesn't look like it. Mindy, I think that you have won the record for the most questions in a lunch club. So thank you for taking the time to answer those. We really appreciate
I had all these same questions myself, so I'm happy to share
it.
research that I've had to do over the last 6 months or so to learn these things. So if I can call our office, and I'll be glad to try to help you. Thanks,
you.
Gina.
Oh, thank you so much. So reminder, you are all going to get an email from us at whatever email you signed up for this workshop with. You're going to have a recording, you're going to have the slides, you're going to have Mindy's contact information. You will have your report PDF, a link to get your FinCEN ID if you choose to do so, and then a link to that small business guide. If there is anything else that we can help you with, you're going to have our contact information. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. And also be looking on our website. There'll be a link to our website in that email. I think this is our last lunch club of the year. Next week is Global Entrepreneurship Week. That is one of our biggest and busiest weeks of the entire year. We've got workshops, events happening every single day, everything from the Go Texan program. We've got using AI to kind of streamline operations in your business. Co-packing, all kinds of workshops next week. And then we'll end the week with an outdoor market with live music, local vendors, food trucks, and a live pitch competition. We would love to have you join in on any of that. So I'll make sure that that's included in your email. And I do not see any more questions. So thank you everyone for spending your lunch hour talking about federal reporting. I hope your lunch hour tomorrow is a little bit better. So thank you.